Hello and welcome back to bicyclelegs Talks Music and another episode of Anniversary Albums. Today we're going to be looking at albums that are having a significant anniversary in the month of July 2025. So again, for those of you who are new to this series, when I say a significant anniversary, I'm talking about anniversaries that end in a 5 or a 0. So 50th, 25th, 40th, 35th, that sort of thing. You'll get the hang of it as we go along. Unusually, we're only looking at 3 different kinds of anniversary this month. I've got 10 albums as always, so please let me know in the comments which ones you think I should have included that I didn't. But we are only going to be looking at 45th, 50th and 55th anniversaries this month. It's just the ones I ended up picking. That's what we ended up panning out with. So the first one we're going to have a look at is having its 55th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 7th of July 1970. It is the second album by this band, and that is Funhouse by the Stooges. Obviously this is where Iggy Pop got his start. This is the first album where he's actually referred to as Iggy Pop. On the first Stooges album, he's referred to as Iggy Stooge. So that's interesting. We also get saxophone on this album. We've got Stephen Mackay joining the band on tenor saxophone. So, I mean, another really raw, great album, you know, garage rock, proto-punk, whatever you want to call it. It's got that Detroit sound. You know, wonderful songs like Down on the Street, Loose, the wonderful, wonderful TVI, Dirt, which is a bit of a longer song. And then on side 2, you get a couple of more extended songs with 1970. You get the title track, almost 8 minutes of it. And then you get LA Blues. It's just a really, really great album start to finish. I don't know which one I prefer between this one and the debut. They're both really, really close to each other. It's a great album though. Absolutely wonderful way to start this lot of anniversary albums. The next one we're going to have a look at is also having its 55th anniversary in the month of July. It was released the very next day after Funhouse. So it was released on the 8th of July 1970. And that is Cosmo's Factory by Creedence Clearwater Revival. Quite possibly their best known album. I mean, it certainly was for me when I was growing up. It was the one I knew. It's the one that I would see around everywhere. Not necessarily their best-selling album, not necessarily their best album, depending on how you see it. I've done a Creedence Clearwater Revival studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description, so please do check that out if you haven't already, and see where I did end up ranking this one. But I love this album. You know, you've got the wonderful Ramble Tamble, which is, again, an extended piece. It goes for about 7 minutes. But that's nothing compared with the 11-minute version of I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Oh, I love that so much. But you've got so many well-known songs on here. Looking Out My Back Door, Run Through the Jungle, Travelin' Band, Up Around the Bend, Long As I Can See the Light, Who'll Stop the Rain. You know, almost all these songs, you know, still played on classic rock radio. You got their wonderful version of Ooby Dooby, their version of Before You Accuse Me, you know, My Baby Left Me. Just beginning to end, a terrific, terrific Creedence Clearwater Revival album. If you're into that sort of roots rock, and that sort of thing, you really can't go wrong with this album. I'm probably preaching to the converted here, though. I think most people know this album very, very well. As indeed they probably know my next album that I'm going to show, which is having its 50th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 11th of July, 1975. And that is the second self-titled album by this band. And that is, of course, Fleetwood Mac. Now, this obviously also is the debut of the lineup, including Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. This would go multi-platinum. The next album would go ridiculously multi-platinum. But this album was just a massive breakthrough for the band. You know, it's got Rhiannon on it. You know, it's got Say You Love Me. You know, both really, really well-known songs. But there's also other really good stuff on this album, like Monday Morning, Warm Ways, Blue Letter, which is a cover version. Crystal, great song. Landslide, great Stevie Nicks song. You know, World Turning, Sugar Daddy, that's a song I really, really enjoy. Great Christine McVie song. And I'm So Afraid. It's just, you know, terrific, you know, classic rock, whatever you want to call it. It's just a really, really great album from beginning to end. And, you know, they would only go on to even bigger things than this. You know, rumors would be even huger than this album. And this album, as I say, it was a multi-platinum success for them in the US. So the next album we're going to have a look at is having its 45th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released also on the 11th of July, but on the 11th of July 1980. So exactly 5 years after the Fleetwood Mac self-titled album. It was also a breakthrough for this band, and I've just noticed as we're going along, and you'll notice as we keep going too, got a number of black and white album covers this month, so that's kind of interesting too. I am, of course, talking about Vienna by Ultravox. Again, like Fleetwood Mac, changing the lineup here. John Fox is gone. Midge Ure comes in instead, replacing both their vocalist and their guitar player. So they're down from a 5-piece to a 4-piece. They're on a different record label. They've moved from Island to Chrysalis. And yeah, it's a major, major breakthrough for them, though not immediately. It wasn't until the next year in 1981 that they had a huge hit with the title track. Famously kept off the #1 spot in the UK by the rather awful novelty song Shut Up Your Face by Joe Dolce, but still brilliant, brilliant song. But this whole album is just great. You know, it starts off with the wonderful instrumental Astrodyne, which I think is absolutely terrific. New Europeans, got some really crunchy guitar in it. Private Lives is great. Passing Strangers, just wonderful, stately song, you know, goes at a good clip, but it's got this real majesty to it, which I've always really, really loved. Sleepwalk, really, really good too. Just that wonderful early electronic music, just absolutely brilliant. Mr. X kind of got that Kraftwerky kind of feel to it, and it's got this robotic vocal from Warren Cann, the drummer, on it, which you know, very, very effective on it. Western Promise is, you know, almost proggy in a way. It's a rather interesting track. I really, really like that one. Vienna, obviously, the title track, brilliant. And All Stood Still, great ending track. Really good up-tempo song, some great guitar, wonderful synth bass on it. Yeah, it's just a terrific way to end a terrific, terrific album. Also having its 45th anniversary in the month of July is our next album, which was released exactly a week after Vienna. So it was released on the 18th of July 1980. We're looking at another black and white album cover here, and that is Closer by Joy Division. Now, obviously, you know, the great tragedy of losing Ian Curtis around the same time this album came out, just before or just after, I can't quite remember. But their second album, their last album, obviously, after this, they would become New Order, and that would become a whole different beast. A great beast, but a whole different beast nonetheless. This album's just got a dark majesty to it. You know, it's just, yeah, it's one of the creepiest albums I think I own, but it's just absolutely wonderful. You know, you've got the wonderful Atrocity Exhibition, Isolation, Passover, Colony, A Means to an End. Wow, great way to end side one. And you've got Heart and Soul, 24 Hours, The Eternal, and Decades. It's just, it's an incredible album. And just looking at the notes here, I was surprised to see that this was recorded at Britannia Row, which is Pink Floyd's studio. So that's a rather interesting little factoid, I think. But obviously New Order would go on to huge things after this. They would start off sounding quite Joy Division-y, but you know, Joy Division had started with this album to incorporate synthesizers and that sort of thing. Obviously the non-album single that was recorded in these same sessions was Love Will Tear Us Apart, which became a big hit. You know, obviously that's got synthesizer on it and that sort of thing. In New Order would start off sounding quite Joy Division-y, but with more and more synths, and then it would just sort of develop into very much its own beast. So the next album we're having a look at is also having its 45th anniversary in the month of July. It was released 3 days later on the 21st of July 1980. This album was not a big hit. In fact, it's one of the worst selling albums this band ever had. We're looking at another black and white album cover here, and that is Chicago 14 by Chicago. Now, I did a whole show where we talked about Chicago in the 80s with the wonderful Todd Evans from Recurrent with Todd Evans. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Please do check that out if you haven't already. We both love this album. This is an absolute gem. It's the absolute sort of buried treasure in the Chicago catalogue, because this album sold next to nothing. You know, it would be another 2 years before their next album would come out. They would have lineup changes. They would change record labels. They would obviously link up with David Foster and have the big hit with Hard to Say I'm Sorry. This album sank without a trace, Chicago 14, and it's a shame because it's an absolutely wonderful album. You get absolutely raving manipulation to start off with, you know, real new wave energy to that song. You got the beautiful Upon Arrival, Gorgeous Song for You, Where Did the Lovin' Go? You know, if you're a big Peter Cetera fan and you've never checked out Chicago 14, he's all over this album. So, you know, check it out. Birthday Boy is the last song for Chicago that Danny Serafin and Hawk Walensky would write, and it's a really good one. You get the great Hold On to kick off side 2. Overnight Cafe's got this great sort of energy to it, like this sort of feel to it. Thunder and Lightning's probably my favourite song on the album. Absolutely love it. I knew that song before I had this album because I had it on a compilation album. I'd Rather Be Rich, great Robert Lamb song, which was actually a song that he'd had in his pocket for a few years. If you get the more recent re-release of Chicago 10 on CD with bonus tracks, it's got an early version of I'd Rather Be Rich on it. I think the version on Chicago 14 is much better. And then The American Dream, great James Pankow song. You know, Chicago were never afraid to get political back in the day, and they do so on The American Dream. This album was produced by Tom Dowd, so I don't know why. I mean, Chicago just were in a bad place at the time, and the record company didn't believe in them and didn't push the record. So ended up letting them go and paying them a whole lot of money to leave the label. So the next album we're going to have a look at is having its 55th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 24th of July 1970 in the UK. It wasn't released until December of 1970 in the US. This is the second album by this band, and yes, it is yet another black and white album cover for today. And that is Time in a Word by Yes. Over on Curlis Mania with Tom Curlis, he and I did an album battle where we did a comparison between Yes's self-titled debut album and Time in a Word. I will leave a link to that in the description. Please do check that out. It was a tough choice, but I really love Time in a Word. Probably the orchestra on this is maybe a bit of a drawback, but the songs are really great. Again, they choose great cover versions as well as doing great original songs. No Opportunity Necessary, No Experience Needed, the Richie Havens song, is absolutely brilliant. Then, great John Anderson song. They do a cover of Stephen Still's Everydays, which is really good. Sweet Dreams is a song that they would bring back in much later tours and do. So it's obviously a song that they had an affinity for. And on side 2 you get The Prophet, which is great. Clear Days. Astral Traveller is probably like an absolutely underrated early Yes classic. Just a great song. And then the rather delicate and beautiful Time in a Word, the title track. It's a really interesting album. Unfortunately, after this, Peter Banks would leave the band because he was dead set against them using the orchestra on this album in the first place. And that would start sort of, all the lineup changes that we would get with Yes, for better and for worse. And, Yes would go off into plenty of different directions as their career went on. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 50th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 28th of July, 1975. And that is Sabotage by Black Sabbath. This is an album I think that in recent years has undergone a real critical reappraisement. I don't think it was necessarily that well regarded back in the day. But these days it is considered to be one of their very, very best albums. And for good reason. It's an interesting album. It's progressive in a bit of a way. Not like progressive rock, but I mean it's progressing from that more basic heavy metal sound that they had kind of defined on those first 3 or 4 albums. It's an innovative album. And I like that about it. Hole in the Sky is great. Don't Start Too Late. Symptom of the Universe. Wow, what a song. Megalomania is great. Thrill of It All. Super Czar. Am I Going Insane? Radio. I know a lot of people don't like that song so much. I actually quite like it. And The Writ closes out the album. I think it's a really strong album, but that's a terrible album cover. Always hated that album cover. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 45th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released on the 29th of July 1980. It is the last of our black and white album covers for today, and that is Voices by Daryl Hall and John Oates. Beginning of the 80s was the beginning of a really fertile period for Hall and Oates. They started having some big hits. They'd had a couple in the 70s, She's Gone and Sarah Smile. But this is really where the sort of prime hit-making period of Hall and Oates began. Because you've got Kiss on My List on this album, and you've got You Make My Dreams. So, 2 songs that still get played on the radio, that still, concert staples up until the point last year when, unfortunately, Daryl Hall and John Oates went their separate ways because they're having sort of serious disputes over business and that sort of thing. It's a shame. But you've got a lot of other great songs on this album, like Hard to Be in Love with You, How Does It Feel to Be Back? That's a great John Oates song. I think some of the John Oates songs on these albums get overlooked, and that's a bit of a shame. Got a Lot of Nerve is great. United State. Big Kids. This has the original version of the song Every Time You Go Away, which wasn't really a hit for Hall and Oates, but years later, Paul Young would do a wonderful cover version of it and make a huge hit out of it. It's a great song. Africa is good, another John Oates song. It's a really good song. And as I say, it started this sort of, early to mid 80s run that Hall and Oates had, where they just had hit after hit after hit. They were all over the radio. They were all over the charts. And I love that period. I love the 70s Hall & Oates too, don't get me wrong. But, you know, this is just absolutely, you know, primo Hall & Oates period for me. So, yeah. And then the last album we're going to have a look at is having its 50th anniversary in the month of July. It was originally released right at the end of the month on the 31st of July 1975. It is the debut album by this wonderful New Zealand band. I am, of course, talking about Mental Notes by Split Enz. The very first video I ever did for this channel, other than just an introduction video, was a studio albums ranked of Split Enz. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Go and watch it, but please do mind that this was nearly 4 years ago. I had no idea what I was doing compared to now. I mean, some would say I still don't know what I'm doing, but I really didn't know what I was doing back then. So be kind. I still think the actual ranking holds up. This ranked very, very highly. I adore this album. It is a strange album. It is a remarkable album. It sounds like nothing else. And I love that about it. People have called it progressive rock. They've called it art rock. It's just strangeness from the pen of Phil Judd and Tim Finn, and, you know, played by this lineup of the band, this early lineup of the band. It's the only album that would have Wally Wilkinson on lead guitar, which is a shame because I love his playing. It does get a little buried on this album, but that's not his fault. That's a production thing. But every song on this album is just absolutely wonderful. Walking Down a Road, what a way to announce yourself to the world. Under the Wheel, just incredible, spooky, weird song. Amy Darling is great. It's a song that Phil Judd lyrically wrote about his newborn daughter. So Long for Now, really great way to end side one. Then side two, you get the incredible Stranger Than Fiction. Just great arty weirdness. Beautifully sung by Tim Finn with a couple little interjections from Phil Judd. Then you get the incredible Time for a Change. Just those two kind of segue into each other. Time for a Change, just an absolute showcase for Tim Finn's glorious vocals. And a great guitar solo at the end from Wally Wilkinson. Absolutely brilliant. Maybe was the single off this album. It died without a trace, which is just an absolute shame because I love that song to death. Really, really good song. My son absolutely loves the song Maybe as well. So Titus, really great. Again, very arty kind of song. Then you get Spellbound. And wow, what a spine-tingling song. Almost the end of the album. There's a little short title track at the end called Mental Notes, which actually on the original versions of this album, it would go into a locked groove. So it would just have this, the Phil Judd's voice going, must make a mental note, make a mental note, make a mental note. Yeah, so, and that would just keep going, and if you had like a manual turntable until you lifted the needle. So just an incredible debut album. No other Split Enz album would sound quite like this. Even the follow-up, which was, they re-recorded 4 of the songs for this for the second album. I don't think they did any of them as well on the second album as they do here. But just an incredible album. And if you know Split Enz, if you know the 80s stuff, you know the hits, you've never listened to Mental Notes, go and do yourself a favor, because it's very different from that, but it's absolutely wonderful stuff. So there you have it. Those are my anniversary albums for the month of July 2025. Please do let me know in the comments which of these you like, which of them maybe you don't like so much, and most importantly, let me know which albums you think I should have included that I left off this list. Some of them will have been on my longer list. Sometimes you guys come up with albums I never even thought of, and I love it when you do that because it makes me go out and listen to them. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to see some of my other anniversary album shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels like Curless Mania, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.